My name is Elisa Brandt, and I am a part of the St. Stephen's Lutheran Church community, which is in Monona as well. Maybe I heard it from you. We connected along the way, and maybe some colleagues as well that shared this, what was happening, and an invitation happened.
Rolfe Nervig, also at St. Stephen's Lutheran. She didn't say that she's the pastor there. I'm a member, and she invited me to join this Awaken Dane effort, and I thought, oh, this sounds kind of interesting, so I'll give it a try.
Hi, so I'm Agnés, which is the French pronunciation for Agnés. I don't like Agnés. I am Agnés, and that's very important.
Let's practice it.
Practice. But really, a person's identity is important, isn't it? So I'm from Our Savior Lutheran Church, where Joey was pastor a long time ago. I forgot mine. And I heard about it from Zach, our pastor, and we were a few who joined the group, and that was 2 years ago. And I'm thinking that I'm really going to miss it. Yeah, it's going to be hard not to see you guys. Really, you can come.
You can come anytime, truly. Yeah, that'll be great. Even if you just come grab food and leave, we have a few questions, like I said, and you don't all have to answer every one of them. You certainly can. And we're working with one mic here, so we'll just kind of pass it back and forth as you have something you feel like you want to share. So I would love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about your experience in dwelling in the Word, and maybe even more so dwelling in the neighborhood. How was that like for you? Because I think that's a new concept, especially dwelling in the neighborhood for many people. So how was that for you?
All right, I'll just start. Let's just get it going, right? So I tend to be an impatient person for certain things. And so repetition is kind of, yes, yes. So I have to admit, I had done dwelling in the Word for this and that on occasion, but to continually do it over and over again, each and every time. And as pastors, we did it again, so a couple times a month. And what was amazing about it, really, is that I found that each time, sometimes I'd hang on the same thing, but how different I really was experiencing that Word in front of me if I just stayed open to what caught me. And then to be able to dig in why. And that takes some vulnerability and connection to be able to do some awareness. And so I grew to appreciate that. So not only do you have to be a good listener to your partners, but that's amazing to hear their stories too, if you're really listening. But then the vulnerability to be able to share your own. That's not always easy. And then to take that out to the neighborhood, I would just say to walk with a new awareness. It's not just going out and doing for or being the one to help out or whatever not. But it is also to be present and show yourself. And so I'd say that slowing down to that vulnerability as well as just being present to listen. It was a good practice for me.
I'll focus a little more on the dwelling in the neighborhood for me. And one of the things that encouraged me was it's only a little bit of a nudge. It wasn't like go out and wrangle somebody you've never met before. It was, who might you know a little bit or be acquainted with, who you would want to get to know a little bit better. And possibly it might lead to a little more of a relationship, maybe it won't. And so what happened for me was I do some driving of people to medical appointments, and it's coordinated through the McFarland Senior Center, and there's this delightful woman who coordinates all that, and this was like an excuse to get to know her a little bit better. I knew her in that context of her contacting me to take people for a medical drive, but I hadn't really gotten to know her very much. And so I just said, hey, how about if we go and have a cup of coffee? And it was a nudge. Like I said, it wasn't a kick in the pants. It was a nudge.
I like that about the nudge. It's true that the things that were asked of us were very progressive. And at first I didn't see the point. But little by little it became more interesting. And it had changed the way I look at my neighborhood and at the people in my neighborhood. We'll to talk more about that, or okay. So should I start now?
I have one thing I need to share.
Okay. I will say something about dwelling in the word also, because at first I thought it was boring too. But we've done 2 years about on the same text because I missed some. And tonight, I just was drawn to something that I had never paid attention to, and that actually changed for me the way I was reading the text. And then my partner Carla talked about something I had underlined also with a question mark, and she had an answer for that. I thought it's incredible what you can learn from that text. And then your partner might have answers to what you were wondering. It's an experience that is really worth it. And I think it had made me also read other things differently, paying attention about other things, and I like to talk. And I think that I think it has made me a little more of a better listener. And I'll keep working on it.
Based on, and you were kind of getting into this, so this is a perfect setup for how things ended. What changed in your work, either in or your posture towards your neighborhood through this series of experiments and dwelling in the neighborhood specifically? So let me just say that again. What changed for you in your work in the neighborhood or your posture towards your neighborhood through this series of experiments, if anything? And it doesn't mean you have to have something, but if you did, I'd love to hear it.
All right, so we could sit here for a while, just decide. So I live in a circle, it's like our block, where I am. And I'm going to admit that my immediate neighbor, he goes to a neighboring Lutheran church. And so he loves to call me pastor, he loves to tell everybody in the circle about his pastor neighbor. And so I just had, I just assumed that everybody kind of gave me that look like, I know what she's going to be about. She's going to try to get me to church or love Jesus or whatever it might be. So, I mean, I have a lot of people time anyway. I kind of say to myself, I walk around in a circle with a dog and just kind of call it. Assuming everybody thought something about me, I guess. This time of slowing down, being open, being aware, having that spiritual muscle, being with and not having expectation of doing for. I started to go around the circle with more awareness, more care, more openness. Even I am an extrovert, but I didn't feel like it. I was tired. But I will reach out. So, I mean, to talk to neighbors. I shared the eclipse experience with a group of neighbors who just happened to be gathering, and we just had that moment of joy. I had a neighbor who I spent an extra moment to ask a question about her dog as she was talking about mine, and then I found her dog had died just recently, and so I was able to just give care of being with. And the neighbor that just lived in the back of our yard, that we have a connecting yard, and they built a fire pit like right up against ours, and the smoke often comes and the noise of their parties, and then I had often say your dog just pooped in our yard, or that kind of thing. It's not been super friendly, but I really softened even towards those neighbors, and they've got these 2 little boys, and I'm sure they've got a big life, and so just trying to move towards at least a better relationship, even though there's a little struggle there. So overall, it's been really an amazing experience to have there.
So I'll share an experiment that I embarked on. It was after a number of smaller experiments, and that was one of the things with Awaken Dane. There were kind of small steps taken and small experiments, very tiny little ones, but just encouraging you to go out of your comfort zone a little bit. And then this past late winter, early spring, I decided to try a little bit bigger deal, and I decided that I would like to get to know some of the people who are immediate neighbors within spitting distance, who I see them, I say hello to them, but I don't know them beyond that. And then there's a few other folks that I do know a little bit better, and I decided that I would have a gathering out in front of our house. It was still quite early in the spring, so it was a little touch and go. Fortunately, the weather was very nice, and I made up a little flyer, and I copied it off, and I just went from door to door. And amongst these houses that are pretty much adjacent to us. And at each house where someone was home, most people were home when I stopped by. And I invited them, and I said, it's just an opportunity for us to get to know each other and celebrate the oncoming spring. And had a few refreshments out in the driveway, set up some chairs, put up a fire pit, and I was surprised that the people who were home, they said, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, I'll stop by. Yeah, that's a good idea." We ended up with 17 people who stopped by that afternoon. And one of the interesting things for me was that my wife is more of an introvert than I am, and she's very afraid of taking a risk with other people. And so she was like standing off. Oh, yeah, no. You know, she was not encouraging this at all. That's your game, buddy. You go ahead, but I'm not part of this thing. And when people started to arrive, I went into the house and I said, well, why don't you come on out and join us? And she did. And afterwards, she admitted, you know, I didn't think that thing was going to roll at all, but it went well.
It's interesting, we have different experiences. Whoa. Better? Yeah. So, for me and my husband, we walk a lot in the neighborhood. So we kind of see a lot of people, and my husband talks to a few. I talk to the people with dogs, usually. Except there is a house where every time we go, there were 3 dogs, now there are 4. Very yappy dogs, and they yap for the entire time when we're even close to them. And I was extremely annoyed with that. And I didn't want to talk to these people with that yaps, with these dogs. And I decided that I was going to make an effort. So first, once when the lady was out, I talked to her and we exchanged a few words. And another time, I said hello to the dogs too. And then I decided that we were encouraged to give little things to be with. It's bring something not to help or anything, just to say hello. And I decided that I was going to do it for that lady because I was really working on being a better neighbor, even in my mind, which is. So I had that little bag that I was going to give her, and I was going to do that for Christmas, and I didn't because I had other things to do. And so I was going at the beginning of the year, and I didn't because I had other things to do. And then I decided I needed to go. And I took my little bag, and I knocked at the door, and no answer. I knocked again, and the lady came, and she looked like she was in a bad mood. And I said, it's just a little something for you. And I gave it to her with a little card, and I went away. And then for Valentine's Day, I received a card from her. And she said, you don't know what you have done for me, because when you brought me these little goodies, I was having a very bad day. I was sick, and I've learned since that her husband is very sick and needs a lot of care. And just having somebody with a smile and giving me something, thank you so much. And I was very moved by that. And we often talked after about the spirit on our shoulder. And I was thinking, why didn't I go before that? Why did I decide that day to go? Well, maybe I got a nudge that tells me that maybe it was needed that day. And since then, I've been trying to pay attention to these kind of things, and I hope to be more open to that. And since then, we've had more conversations. That's when I heard about her husband. And I went inside and pet the dogs. They're nice. They just want attention. And we talked about flowers, and she gave me seeds for my cosmos flowers, the big tall ones. And now I have a yard full of cosmos. And so I think of her every time. I see them, and I haven't seen them this summer because I was gone a lot. But it's one of my projects to go back and talk to her, knock on the door, because I was hoping to see her when I walk, but I am not. But I'm nicer to the dogs. That seems silly, but the dogs don't bother me anymore. I just say, yes, I know you want attention, and don't worry, and I'm nice walking by that house, which is, I didn't realize that doing this type of things would change the way I act, I feel, I even think, and I thought that was very interesting. It's been quite an experience for me. So, and it doesn't sound like that much, right? But it has changed the things for me, and I hope for her. And I'm not sure if I'm waiting for the next nudge to go and knock on the door and say, how are you doing? I'll see before it gets cold.
We have two more questions that I think are both really good, so I want to try to get to them, but I also want to leave enough time for Q&R. So maybe this next one, just a brief comment. I think of just one thing that you wish you knew on day one of Awaken Dane that you know now to impart your wisdom. So is there one thing, it can be relatively succinct, that you know, that you wish you knew when you were starting this experience?
I was really open to it, so I was really excited, and everybody I asked said yes right away. That never happens as a pastor. But I think one thing that would have been, I wish they would have known, is how much we would have had to slow down. I wasn't ready for that or prepared for that. So.
Yeah, I guess. I think I was probably expecting more of a strategy session or a planning session or something like that, and I was pleased that it was, like Pastor Elisa said, slowing down, taking small steps, reinforcing it over and over, repeat, but not in a boring way.
I don't know if there is something. I thought first when I came it was odd what we did, and so maybe it's odd at the beginning, but it really gets to you eventually. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but stick with it. It's worth it.
I think that's really helpful. So after this question, I'm going to invite any of y'all to ask any questions you have, and we'll have probably about 10 minutes for that, and then we're going to dwell in what we're hearing from the panel around your tables again. So I'll walk us through that when we come to that time. But just prepare those questions now, and again, if you don't want to share in front of the group, truly, you can slide next to the next person next to you and ask them to share on your behalf. That's great. So here's the last question. And I'd love to invite you to think about this both personally, and if you have the perspective, on the congregational team that you're a part of, or even the congregation you're a part of as a whole. What has been the impact of Awaken Dane in your life, or within your team, or perhaps even within your congregation? How would you reflect on that?
Okay, that works. So I will say that I've been a pastor for 25 years, and I think I've always had that drive of what's next, what's that next cool thing, what's that next good thing, what can we do, who can we help, and so I've always been in the midst of that. That's what drives me. How do we start something new? How do we get that next strategy? I was looking for that too. So, but the more I'm reading, the more I'm reflecting, the more I've walked with Awaken Dane. How can we hear God? How can we understand what God wants for this church, for this world, for our communities, if we're not paying attention? And I know it's very repetitive to say this, but I'm going to say it again because I need it for myself. We've got to continually slow down. And that's hard because I'm learning too that society, our culture, is speeding up. Like, you got to know that. I mean, we all feel it, we're all walking it, but it's truly happening. It's driving forward. And the church, I think, I'll say for myself, for probably too long, has fed into that cultural piece instead of saying, whoa, this is, how do we get to know each other? How do I know your story? How do we share love? How do we understand God without having that space, that muscle, to pay attention to where God might be taking us next? So, that's what I was saying.
What I sensed for myself as well as for our team of 5 of us was a growing sense of this concept that you will hear about over and over, of being with or doing with, not just doing for. Doing for is important, and our congregation is good at doing for. But allyship, or walking alongside, or being a companion in the journey, our team, I think, got that. What we have been started to talk about now is how do we spread that out more within our congregation so that more people are opened up to this idea of being with. And I saw Pastor Carla over here, so I just wanted to also toss in that one of the blessings and the gifts to me was after the first 9 months, we were having a kind of a wrap-up session for that part of the Awaken Dane, and I just so happened to be wearing the Black Lives Matter shirt that day. And Pastor Carla from SS Morris, she came up to me afterwards, and apparently she was kind of struck by this old white guy wearing a Black Lives Matter. And so she came up to me and she said, I want to get a picture of you, with you, in that shirt. And that interchange led to a really good relationship between me and a couple of other people from St. Stephen's and SS Morris, and we've done some things together as a result of that.
I don't know if I can add to that, because really I was listening and I agree with that, slowing down, reflecting, being more open to listening. And I hope it's going to translate in how I participate in church, in our church with our Savior. We are in a big time of change, and it will be interesting to really listen and participate in another way.
All right, thank you, panelists, for all your responses and reflections. And I want to just invite the room. We have probably about 10 minutes or so for this portion. If you have any questions that came to mind or anything that you'd love more clarity about, or whatever you want to ask, now would be the time. So if there's no questions, I probably have one or two ready, and then we'll move into discussion around the table. So, any questions? That was so perfect. Oh, yes. And you'll have to really yell as you're way back there, but yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. My question is, I've been hearing this word, well. So, what is this about? Because I just want to get that explanation so that it will help me and kind of like define my concept of well and what I am supposed to do, even in this program. Thank you.
Can you say what was the word that was? Dwell. Thank you. Okay, yes. Yeah, take it away.
Well, what we did today, we read the text and we thought about what attracted our attention. And next time it's going to be the same text, and the time after it's going to be the same text. And so that's why we talk all about repetition and slowing down. And it's true that you read it, you listen to two voices reading it, and there might be times when it's the same words that are going to grab you, but there will be other times when it's something else that's going to grab your attention. And is it a time in your life? Is it what's happening? Is it something that you were thinking about before? It's fascinating to see how little by little, at first you can be bored, and maybe sometime you will be bored again, but mostly it's quite an experience. So that's what reading and listening to the Spirit, is that, I think that must be it. It's just reading, listening, and listening to what comes to your mind. The Spirit is talking to you. Did I say? Yeah. So that's dwelling into the Word.
I was just going to piggyback off that and just briefly say, to dwell, to be, to wonder, to be curious, to ponder, with God and with one another. And again, it says all the things, joy now, to make that happen.
Yeah, maybe I'll add one other word that's helpful for me, and that's presence. And I think dwelling really is the invitation to be fully present with whatever it is you're engaging. So that can be me and my spouse, it can be me and my kids. It means I'm like taking this phone and I'm putting it away, and I'm fully listening to my neighbor as they talk about whatever city ordinance they want to talk about for a lot longer than I was interested in. But I'm going to be present with them. And I think what I'm learning is like that is a way, that's a gift for them and it's a gift for me. And in that mutuality, God often shows up in some really beautiful ways. And so it's developing this habit of being fully present in whatever conversation, whatever moment we're in, which can feel boring or slow or unproductive, but is also a beautiful space. So, any other questions? I think we have time for one or maybe two more. Yes?
So when you talk about, going out into your neighborhood, what do you define as your neighborhood?
Wonderful question. So yeah, what is your neighborhood? Do you want to take a crack at that or should I answer that? I can just go over that. You're actually naming, I think, something that we really struggled with within this program. So when we first started this 4 or 5 years ago, we said, let's call it the church, wherever the church building is, where people come together to gather, that neighborhood. And also, wherever you live, if you want to do that too. And as you can imagine, that became pretty immediately very confusing. And what we found, and maybe this isn't surprising, is that most paid clergy have it pretty wired in their brains to think about the church building and then the neighborhood based on where the church building is. And there's really good reason for that. And I was a pastor for 20 years in a local congregation, so like my brain thinks that way too. But as we talked about it, we were trying to think like, wait, what's the purpose of this? The purpose is to get the entire congregation of your church to develop this muscle wherever they live, work, breathe, do life. And much of our lives is in proximity to where we personally dwell. And so we've come up with a lot more clarity for the last few years, and so the answer in this program is your neighborhood is the proximity to where you live. Now, is that 2 blocks? Is that 10 blocks? There is some space to let that like breathe. But the imagination and the curiosity and the invitation is to think in terms of proximity to where you live. And here's a couple things just to tease this. If you live like close to one another, you go to the same church, you can do experiments together. That's pretty cool. But also cool is that there's people in this room who live close to you who are part of a different church that are in this room, and you can start to think about how to do experiments together across different congregational teams, but in the same neighborhood. And we have a number of stories like that, and those stories are really cool. So, is that matching with, at this point, if you were like, nope, that's not it, I'd be sad. That's a great question. Last question, we just have a moment because I want you all to have some time.
Last year, the one publication Jonna gave to the neighborhood was also a place where you work, because some people, that's just where they kind of live, and they go home late at night, sleep, and go back to work when they do, but at the same time, this is who you're surrounded by, so.
Sure.
That actually did help to fill that as well.
No, that's great. Yeah, and so if you can hear that comment, it's like some people have thought more in terms of like where they work, and we just recognize like this is where the coaches are actually so helpful. So if you're having a hard time personally kind of landing on defining that for whatever reason, because I work at home, but whatever it is, talk to your coaches and within your congregational teams. It's a great space for that.